Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, we're going to talk about the root of gaslighting, okay? I want you to really understand the core of what creates this and where it comes from, and then I'm going to give you the tip on the one thing that, in my experience, is the only thing that can put an end to this behavior with a narcissistic co-parent. Let me just remind you, if you like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And as always, please feel free to share on social media so we can help as many people as possible that are dealing with these types of issues. Now, the root of gaslighting is really a very deep childhood wound, and it comes from a person's feelings and perceptions not being validated, being told that what you feel isn't what you feel. And this is one of the reasons that I always tell people, when you're working with your kids or you're helping with your kids with something, we're trying not to get involved in what's going on in the other parent's world. And we're trying not to ask a lot of questions about that. But I do always try to remind people to validate how their children feel. If the child says, I'm upset about this, you don't kind of brush it under the rug and say, well, you don't need to be upset about that, or you're not upset about that, or, I'm sure that's not how you really feel, or whatever. You don't want to do those things. Those types of reactions are what create this gaslighting behavior in adults. So you want to make sure you're validating your children. But it really comes from that narcissist not having that when they were a child. It's kind of like if you're sad and you're crying and you have a parent that is trying to toughen you up. The parent may have the best of intentions. They're trying to toughen you up for the world. They're like, oh, you're not sad. You're fine. Suck it up. No crying. Right. Well, then what that creates is this distrust for your own feelings and your own emotions and your own perceptions of what's happening internally inside you. And so it's like, oh, okay, I'm not sad. This isn't sad. This isn't, what I'm feeling. Well, okay, let me try to, figure out what's going on. And through the process of that, what they kind of learn to do is to bend their perceptions, right, to fit the situation because they're not being validated in that way. So then it kind of becomes more fluid. And then as they get older, it becomes kind of that defense mechanism where it's like, oh, I forgot. I was feeling a certain way or whatever it is, because you as the other party can't really say what was going on internally with them, right? You don't have any way to prove whether they actually forgot. You don't have any way to prove whether they actually felt sad that day or whether they actually were struggling with an internal emotion or whatever it is. That's where the whole thing of, well, that's not what happened. This is what happened, because they start to do that with everything where they're bending the perception. It's relative. It's very fluid. And that, again, has its roots back in their childhood of not being validated in that particular way. And, most of us, when we're dealing with a person like this, where we come from is, oh, I'm just going to meet them with logic, right? Almost everybody that I deal with that has a narcissistic high conflict ex tries to come back with logic of the situation. And I think sometimes when I say to people, don't react emotionally and don't tell them how you feel about things or whatever, they go, oh, okay, that's fine. I won't be emotional. I won't let any of that in. I'm just going to come back with the logic and the truth about what's actually happened. And I'm going to just state the facts on all of it. Well, that's great, except for that may still land you in a back and forth argument, which doesn't look good to the court, right? Even if you're coming back with facts every single time, just because what you're saying is factual and not emotional doesn't mean that that there's an endpoint. It doesn't mean that you're progressing, that you're accomplishing anything, right? If I have a client that goes back and forth with the other person 3 or 4 times and it doesn't come to a resolution, at some point someone has to stop, right? Because it's not getting us anywhere. We can go back and forth all day and we can agree to disagree or whatever, but we're still not necessarily going to come to a resolution. And I think that when we're returning over and over with logic and we keep coming back with more and more of those types of logical arguments, we're expecting to sway the other person's opinion or the outcome of the situation. I always say to people, like, it's not like your narcissist is going to come back and go, oh, yeah, you know what? You're totally right. All of your points so make sense. And I agree with you. That's what we should do. Okay, that response is never coming. And even if they felt that internally or thought that, they would never, ever admit that or give you the satisfaction of winning in that way. And so you're never going to get that type of response. And I think a lot of times we're looking for that closure or for that resolution of a situation because we don't like that feeling of something out there or dangling or unresolved or whatever. But honestly, the only way that you can put an end to this behavior is to disengage. And I say that over and over, and people think they're disengaging, and many times in reality, they're actually not. But shutting down that conversation is the only way, because if they decide that they want to keep arguing about it and you're still meeting them with facts, you're still giving them the opportunity to come back with another response every time you respond, right? Regardless of what your response is or isn't, just about it. I mean, except for maybe I say sometimes to just say received. If you have to, a lot of times that is minimal enough to put an end to the conversation. But it's the other reason that we want to keep our responses as minimal as possible. So they need to be factual, but they also need to be minimal. And that's because we don't want to give them the opportunity to keep coming back with these gaslighting behaviors and continuing to attack or to bend the conversation in the direction they want it to go, or bend the perception the way they want it to go, and tell you that what you're perceiving is wrong and that they didn't do any of that and you did it all, or whatever the situation is. It's usually some type of narrative like that. Honestly, the only way that you can sort of win at that type of game is to just refuse to play. You're not ever going to accomplish getting them to listen to you or to agree with you or to do what you want them to do. You have to just disengage at some point. And again, I'm not saying that you don't ever engage in that. Like sometimes I do engage to a point in order to maybe draw out a fact or to show their difficulty or whatever. But a lot of times when I'm trying to help a client and I'm saying, okay, we're going to respond in this way, it's not because I think that we're actually going to win the argument. It's not because I actually think that we're going to get the outcome that we're looking for. What I tell clients is you have to look at this as you're going to get one of two results when you do this. You're either going to, okay, maybe if it's child focused enough and enough reasoning, maybe they'll agree to what you're asking for eventually, but not likely. But what you will get out of it, if you don't get agreement, you will get more proof of the difficulty of this person and the fact that they can't engage in a normal conversation about the children or about, the decision that needs to be made or whatever. When you can kind of draw that out and show instances of it without being attacking and gaslighting them in return, then what that can start to do is build grounds for you to be able to ask for, final decision making in legal custody issues, or a parenting coordinator, or a, whatever type of resolution that you want to ask for when you can't come to any resolution with the other person. because of this continued type of behavior. Sometimes on key issues around legal custody, like if we're talking about vaccinations or we're talking about whether to get dental procedures done or, whether to put the child on medication for a certain issue or whatever. Those types of things, sometimes I will go back and try to kind of box them in with the facts of like, okay, the provider recommended this, the doctor's recommending it, so that you can kind of show that they're not agreeing. But when it comes to other more fluid things or I shouldn't say fluid, but maybe other less impactful things like extracurriculars and different things like that, sometimes you just have to accept that you're not going to be able to get agreement. And you just have to disengage from the fight, because that's really the only way to stop the gaslighting. And honestly, that's true even if you're in a relationship with a toxic person, or whether you're dealing with a co-parent that is toxic, or whether you have parents or siblings or bosses or whatever it is that gaslight and engage in this type of behavior. Really, the only way to stop it is through disengagement. So if you'd like to get more help on these types of issues, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page. You can book a time to speak to a member of my staff so you can learn more about my services and how I might be able to support you on your custody journey. Talk to you guys soon.